All right, so I keep piecing these together and finding the best kind of seaming I can to extend the field of vision in the photo. And I already have a pretty wide shot, but I can keep extending it and just taking it down to 50%, one layer at a time, locking them as I go, so I don't accidentally erase from the wrong layer, which is the most common mistake. Right-clicking and rasterizing them, and then looking at, in the area that they overlap, finding something in the mid-range, like that trash can, that I can line up. Especially when you handhold, you can get really interesting things that happen. Like look at this kind of spiral of grass. It's a moire pattern of grass just because my camera tilted a little bit. But I don't need to worry about that in seaming because I'm just finding the place where it's all or nothing. I go on one side of that trash can and one side of these bricks, and I cut through the trees on one side, between these two, and around this tree, and up to the sky, up and out. And I delete everything on this side. Put it back to 100%. And it's just the same process over and over. And then using that soft eraser where you need it, like in the sky, to seam it over. But the best case scenario is you don't even need to. All right, so now I've got an even longer field of vision. And another one. Let's see if I can skip one. I can almost skip one, but it will look better if I do it this way. Okay, so let's go fast here. 50%. Find the overlap. Find halfway within that overlap. Sadly, I guess that's this tree, which doesn't give me a whole lot, but it will help bridge the two. So I'm going to work around this tree. Okay. Use my lasso. Work around that cloud, why not? Get in between. And I erase everything on this side. Put it back to 100%, rasterize it, and then delete. And then use my eraser and blend it in. Careful not to extend it too much. I might have to shrink my eraser again so I don't get that ghosting effect. Now in man-made things like these paver stones, I have to find the exact point in which they overlap to get the angle right. And that can be complicated. Now if I keep traveling and erasing, I'll eventually get to white, and so you want to be careful not to erase any more than you need to. Okay, now, last one. Can lock these as I go. Okay, last one. Take it down to 50%. This is why it's nice to only have to do 5. Because when you do too many, then you just are doing the same thing over and over. Find something in the middle of the overlap zone. There's really nothing in the middle of the overlap zone. Maybe that background light tower right there. But notice where the man-made things come together, that's what you have to pay attention to. And then cut it out. Rasterize it, put it to 100%, and delete. And that one doesn't look like it needs to be blended too much. Yeah, that seems pretty perfectly. It's about time. And I'll get this little, like almost imperceptible angle change there. But on the whole, it will curve the perspective just enough to make sense. So you have this kind of nice S curve going through the composition, which I like. All right. So now, what do? I'm going to extend my canvas size just a little bit on the right side, so there's white all the way around it. So I'll make it, say, 80 inches. And then I'll crop it to get rid of some of this excess space. And that's the first step of the process, seaming together your raw exposures. And so I'll save this, and I even want to save it as a JPEG to upload later. First I'm saving as a PSD, then as a JPEG, and I'll call it Assignment 5, Raw Exposures. That's the first thing we upload for this assignment. And I'm going to put it down to a quality of 10 because I don't want it to be larger than 5 megabytes. It's actually even a lesser quality than 10. Because these get to be pretty big files. Let's try a quality of 5. There we go. Remember, that's this stage of the project, right here. So that's the first thing we upload. Now, I promised you I'd show you an easier way to do it. So once you've all had experience with the difficulties of piecing it together by hand like this, to do that exact process, we can actually use Photoshop to strong effect. So for the moment, I'm going to close this. And instead, I'm going to go to my folder of exposures. And this does not take long, but you want to have nothing else open in Photoshop. And I'm going to take that same group of exposures, and this is what I'm going to do in Photoshop. I first open Photoshop on its own, without anything open. I go to File, I go to Automate, under File, and I go to Photo Merge. All the cool stuff is under Automate. And now this is an important screen to understand. We'll be using it for the next project as well. I want to reposition and collage, basically, my images. But I don't want to warp them. Just like we didn't transform and warp or distort any of our photos, we want to see what our raw exposures give us. So we're going to collage them, which allows them to grow and rotate, but they stay their same exposure. And then we want to have this checked, the blend images together, and it will find that seam where they best match each other. Then I hit Browse, and this is why we put them into folders. And now I can go into my documents and go into my photo folder. Right there, and go into my assignment, and go to Pass To, and select all of those photos. And then I just hit OK, and it's going to collage them together and figure out the best place to blend them, and it will put each one on its own layer. And it's doing this all by itself. I'm not having to do anything. You'll see what it's doing with the layers over here. And then it tries to find the best place where they overlap, where the pixels match exactly. And usually it gets it right. Sometimes it does something really crazy and strange.
Did you pick only first, not reposition also?
Reposition is like collage without allowing your exposures to get shrunken. And so I'll use collage because it still keeps your exposures intact, but it allows them to tilt and shrink a little bit if needed. Now, the thing that I am not able to do easily is to tilt my exposures while I'm trying to put them in, because that's just like hit or miss how much you tilt them. But the computer is able to see that really well. So in my version, let me show you the two now. So I open the one that I put together, and I'll show these side by side because they're very similar but slightly different, right? So here it shows that my exposures are traveling up here, and then they start traveling down. In fact, what Photoshop can show me is that it's kind of the opposite. And first I started traveling down a little bit, and then I started traveling up. And what I liked about my composition, it having this nice kind of hump in the middle, is actually, no, it's pretty flat in the middle.
Right.
Instead, I was traveling that way. Now, what is the advantage of having Photoshop do it? Well, look at the sky and the transitions in the sky. It will match the exposures in a much more ideal way. And you can actually see it here with each shape. It's using, pixel by pixel matching to find the exact seam that works. And it's all or nothing, just like what we want. And yes, little things might be a tiny bit off, but it does a better job than we could ever really do. But it takes all the creative kind of placement away. And it kind of turns it into this puzzle at full resolution. But I'm fine with you using this tool, mostly because it helps balance out the exposure. Now notice here, this doesn't work so well, right? So it was able to match up the clouds, but because the clouds were moving, it got really confused in this area. And it matched up that branch, but that carried the trunk over. And that's why once we have this step, we then have to go in and find our composition by cropping. And the first thing we'll do is find what's even possible to crop, right? So with the Photoshop one, this is basically my full croppable field. But I don't like how I lose the rocks. But in my own version, I have, because I positioned it and made the hard decisions, I have a larger area that I can work with because it's not so curved. But it's not a whole lot larger. So your next step is to find the most interesting composition you can within your raw exposure layout. Now the other nice thing is you can do this with multiple passes. So I can save this one now as pass 2, panorama exposures, raw, because this is without any processing still. Save that to the desktop. And then I could run the same exact process, close this once it saves, and run the same exact process on my other pass, my tripod pass, and see if I like it better. So I do that by going to Automate, Photo Merge, selecting Collage, blend images together, and browse from the right folder. And you'll see that on in the beginning of the next demo.